Chapter 1. The Ringing Cedar. In the spring of 1994, I chartered 3 riverboats on which I carried out a 4-month expedition on the river Ob in Siberia, from Novosibirsk to Salakhard and back. The aim of the expedition was to foster economic ties with the regions of the Russian far north. The expedition went under the name of the Merchant Convoy. The largest of the 3 riverboats was a passenger ship named the Patrice Lumumba. Western Siberian riverboats bear rather interesting names: the Maria Ulyanova, the Patrice Lumumba, and the Mikhail Kalanin, as if there were no other personages in history worth commemorating. The lead ship, Patrice Lumumba, housed the expedition headquarters along with a store where local Siberian entrepreneurs could exhibit their wares. The plan was for the convoy to travel north 3,500 kilometers, visiting not only major ports of call such as Tomsk, Nizhnevarovsk, Katani-Mansisk, and Salakhard, but smaller places as well, where goods could be unloaded only during a brief summer navigation season. The convoy would dock at a populated settlement during the daytime. We would offer the wares we had brought for sale and hold talks about setting up regular economic links. Our traveling was done usually at night. If weather conditions were unfavorable for navigation, the lead ship would put into the nearest port, and we would organize on-board parties for the local young people. Most places offered little in the way of their own entertainment. Clubs and community centers, the so-called houses of culture, had been going downhill ever since the collapse of the USSR, and there were almost no cultural activities available. Sometimes we might go for 24 hours or more without seeing a single populated place, even the tiniest village. From the river, the only transportation artery for many kilometers around, the only thing visible to the eye was the taiga itself. I was not yet aware at the time that somewhere amidst the uninhabited vastness of forest along the riverbank, a surprise meeting was awaiting me, one that was to change my whole life. One day, on our way back to Novosibirsk, I arranged to dock the lead ship at a small village, one with only a few houses at best, dozens of kilometers distant from the larger population centers. I planned a 3-hour stopover so the crew could have shore leave and the local residents could buy some of our goods and foodstuffs, while we could cheaply pick up from them both fish and wild growing plants of the taiga. During our stopover time, as the leader of the expedition, I was approached with a really weird request by 2 of the local senior citizens, as I judged at that time. One of them appeared to be somewhat older than the other. The elder of the 2, a wizened fellow with a long gray beard, kept silent the whole time, leaving his younger companion to do the talking. This fellow tried to persuade me to lend him 50 of my crew, which numbered no more than 65 in total, to go with them into the taiga, a trek of 25 kilometers from the dock where the ship was berthed. They would be taken into the depths of the taiga to cut down a tree they described as a ringing cedar. On top of that, the cedar, which he said reached 40 meters in height, needed to be cut up into pieces which could be carried by hand to the ship. We must, he said, definitely take the whole lot. The old fellow further recommended that each piece be cut up into smaller pieces. Each of us should keep one for himself and give the rest to relatives, friends, and anyone who wished to accept a piece as a gift. He said this was a most unusual cedar. The piece should be worn on one's chest as a pendant. Hang it around your neck while standing barefoot in the grass, and then press it to your exposed chest with the palm of your left hand. It takes only a minute or so to feel the pleasant warmth emanating from the piece of cedar, followed by a slight shiver running through the whole body. From time to time, whenever desired, the side of the pendant facing away from the body should be rubbed with one's fingertips, the thumbs pressed against the other side. The old fellow confidently assured me that within 3 months the possessor of one of these ringing cedar pendants will feel significant improvement in his sense of well-being and will be cured of many diseases. Even AIDS? I asked, and briefly explained what I had learnt about the disease from the press. The oldster confidently replied, from any and all diseases. But this, he considered, was an easy task. The main benefit was that anyone having one of these pendants would become kinder, more successful, and more talented. I did know a little about the healing properties of the cedars of our Siberian taiga, but the suggestion that it could affect one's feelings and abilities, well, that to me seemed beyond the bounds of possibility. The thought came to me that maybe these old men wanted money from me for this unusual cedar, as they themselves called it, and I began explaining that out in the big wide world, women, in an effort to please men, were used to wearing jewelry made of gold and silver and wouldn't pay a dime for some scrap of wood, and so I wasn't going to lay out any money for anything like that. They don't know what they're wearing, came the reply. Gold? Well, that's dust in comparison with one piece of this cedar. But we don't need any money for it. We can give you some dried mushrooms in addition, but there's nothing we need from you. Not wanting to start an argument out of respect for their age, I said, well, maybe someone will wear some of your cedar pendants. They certainly would if a top wood carving craftsman agreed to put his hand to it and create something of amazing beauty. To which the old fellow replied, yes, you could carve it, but it would be better to polish it by rubbing. It will be a lot better if you do this yourself with your fingers whenever your heart desires. Then the cedar will also have a beautiful look to it. Then the younger of the two quickly unbuttoned first his old worn jacket and then his shirt, and revealed what he was wearing on his chest. I looked and saw a puffed out circle or oval. It was multicolored, purple, raspberry, auburn, forming some kind of puzzling design. The vein lines on the wood looked like little streams. I'm not a connoisseur of objets d'art, but from time to time I've had occasion to visit picture galleries. The world's great masters had not called forth any particular emotions in me, but the object hanging around this man's neck aroused significantly greater feelings and emotions than any of my visits to the great museums of the world. How many years have you been rubbing this piece of cedar? I asked. 93, the old fellow responded. And how old are you? 119. At the time, I didn't believe him. He looked like a man of 75. Either he hadn't noticed my doubts, or if he had, he paid no attention to them. In somewhat excited tones, he started in trying to persuade me that any piece of this cedar, polished by human figures alone, would also look beautiful in just 3 years. Then it would start looking even better and better, especially when worn by a woman. The body of its wearer would give off a pleasant and beneficial aroma. quite unlike anything artificially produced by man. Indeed, a very pleasant fragrance was emanating from both these old men. I could feel it, even though I'm a smoker and, like all smokers, have a dulled sense of smell. And there was one other peculiarity. I suddenly became aware of certain phrases in the speech of these strangers that were not common to the residents of this isolated part of the North. Some of them I remember to this day, even the intonations associated with them. Here's what the old fellow told me. God created the cedar to store cosmic energy. When someone is in a state of love, they emit a radiant energy. It takes but a split second for it to reflect off the planets floating overhead and come back to Earth and give life to everything that breathes. The sun is one of those planets, and it reflects but a tiny fraction of such radiance. Only the bright rays can travel into space from man on the Earth, and only beneficial rays can be reflected from space back to Earth. Under the influence of malicious feelings, man can emit only dark rays. These dark rays cannot rise, but must fall into the depths of the earth. Bouncing off its core, they return to the surface in the form of volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, wars, and other things. The culminating achievement of these dark rays is their direct effect on the man originating them, invariably worsening this man's own malicious feelings. Cedars live to be 550 years old. Day and night, their millions of needles catch and store the whole spectrum of bright energy. During the period of the cedar's life, all the celestial bodies which reflect this bright energy pass above them. Even in one tiny piece of cedar, there is more energy beneficial to man than in all the man-made energy installations taken together. Cedars receive the energy emanating from man through space, store it up, and at the right moment give it back. They give it back when there is not enough of it in space, and consequently in man, or in everything living and growing on the earth. Occasionally, though very rarely, one discovers cedars that have been storing up energy but not giving back what they have stored. After 500 years of their life, they start to ring. This is how they talk to us, through their quiet, ringing sound. This is how they signal people to take them and cut them down to make use of their stored up energy on the earth. This is what the cedars are asking with their ringing sound. They keep on asking for 3 whole years. If they don't have contact with living human beings, then in 3 years, deprived of the opportunity to give back what they have received and stored through the cosmos, they lose their ability to give it back directly to man. They will start burning up with energy internally. This torturous process of burning and dying lasts 27 years. Not long ago, we discovered a cedar like this. We determined that it had been ringing for 2 years already. It was ringing very, very softly. Perhaps it is trying to draw out its request over a longer period of time, but still it has only 1 year left. It must be sawed up and given away to people. The old man spoke at length, and for some reason I heard him out. The voice of this strange old Siberian would sound at first quietly confident, then very excited, and each time he got excited, he would rub the piece of cedar with his fingertips as though he were lightly tripping over some kind of musical instrument. It was cold on the river bank. An autumn wind was blowing across the river. Gusts of wind ruffled the hair on the old men's capless heads, but the spokesman's jacket and shirt remained unbuttoned. His fingertips kept rubbing the cedar pendant on his chest, still exposed to the wind. He was still trying to explain its significance to me. Lydia Petrovna, an employee of my firm, came down the gangplank to tell me that everyone else was already on board and ready for departure, waiting for me to finish my conversation. I bade farewell to the oldsters and quickly climbed aboard. I couldn't act on their request for 2 reasons. Delaying departure, especially for 3 days, would mean a significant financial loss. And besides, everything these old fellows said seemed to me at the time to be in the realm of pure superstition. The next morning, during our usual company meeting, I suddenly noticed that Lydia Petrovna was fingering a cedar pendant of her own. Later, she would tell me that after I'd gone aboard, she stayed behind for a while. She noticed that when I started hurrying away from them, the oldster that had been talking with me stared after me with a perplexed look, and then said excitedly to his older companion, "Now how can that be? Why didn't they understand? I really don't know how to speak their language. I couldn't make them believe. I simply couldn't. I got nowhere with them. Nowhere. Why? Tell me, Father." The elder man put his hands on his son's shoulder and replied, "You weren't convincing enough, son. They didn't comprehend." As I was going up the gangplank, Lydia Petrovna went on, "The old man that was talking with you suddenly rushed up to me, grabbed me by the arm, and led me back down to the grass below. He hurriedly pulled out of his pocket a string, and attached to it was this piece of cedar wood. He put it around my neck and pressed it against my chest, and with the palm of both his hand and mine. I even felt a shiver go through my whole body. Somehow, he managed to do this all very quickly, and I didn't even get a chance to say anything to him. As I was walking away, he called after me, "Have a safe journey. Be happy. Please come again next year. All the best people will be waiting for you. Have a safe journey." As the ship pulled away from the dock, the old fellow kept on waving at us for a long time, and then all at once sat down on the grass. I was watching him through a pair of binoculars. The old man that talked with you and later gave me the pendant, I saw him sit down on the grass, and his shoulders were trembling. The older one with the long beard was bending over him and stroking his head. Amidst the flurry of my subsequent commercial dealings, account-keeping, and end-of-voyage farewell banquets, I completely forgot about the strange Siberian oldsters. Upon my return to Novosibirsk, I was afflicted with sharp pains. Their diagnosis was a duodenal intestinal ulcer and osteochondrosis of the thoracic spine. In the quiet of the comfy hospital ward, I was cut off from the bustle of everyday life. My deluxe private room gave me an opportunity to calmly reflect on my 4-month expedition and to draw up a business plan for the next one. But it seemed as though my memory relegated just about everything that had happened to the background, and for some reason the old men and what they said came to the forefront of my thought. I requested to have delivered in the hospital all sorts of literature on cedars. After comparing what I read with what I heard, I became more and more amazed and began to actually believe what the old men had said. There was at least some kind of truth in their words, or maybe the whole thing was true. In the books on folk medicine, there is a lot said about the cedar as a healing remedy. They say that everything from the tips of the needles to the bark is endowed with highly effective healing properties. The Siberian cedar wood has a beautiful appearance and is used with great success by both masters of artistic wood carving and cabinet makers, as well as in producing soundboards for musical instruments. Cedar needles are highly capable of eliminating airborne germs and purifying the surrounding atmosphere. Cedar wood has a distinctive, pleasant, balsam fragrance. A small cedar chip placed inside a house will keep moths away. In the popular science literature, I read that it was the qualitative characteristics for the northern cedars were significantly higher than for those growing in the south. Back in 1792, the academic guy, what is that word? Academician. Back in 1792, the academician P.S. Pallas wrote that the fruits of the Siberian cedar were effective in restoring youth and virility and significantly increasing the body's resilience, its ability to withstand a number of diseases. There is a whole host of historical phenomena directly or indirectly linked to the Siberian cedar. Here is one of them.